The two Shōkaku-class aircraft carriers were built for the Imperial Japanese Navy in the late 1930s, completed shortly before the start of the Pacific War in 1941. They have been called arguably the best aircraft carriers in the world when built. With the exception of the Battle of Midway, they participated in every major naval action of the Pacific War, including the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Indian Ocean Raid, the Battle of the Coral Sea, and the Guadalcanal Campaign. Their inexperienced air groups were relegated to airfield attacks during the attack on Pearl Harbor, but they later sank two of the four fleet carriers lost by the United States Navy during the war, in addition to one elderly British light carrier. The sister ships returned to Japan after the Battle of the Coral Sea, one to repair damage and the other to replace aircraft lost during the battle, so neither ship participated in the Battle of Midway in June 1942. After the catastrophic losses of four carriers during that battle, they formed the bulk of the IJN's carrier force for the rest of the war. As such, they were the primary counterattack force deployed against the American invasion of Guadalcanal in the Battle of the Eastern Solomons in August. 2 months later, they attempted to support a major offensive by the Imperial Japanese Army to push the United States Marines off Guadalcanal. This resulted in the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, where they crippled one American carrier and damaged another in exchange for damage to Shōkaku and a light carrier. Neither attempt succeeded, and the Japanese withdrew the remaining forces from Guadalcanal in early 1943, using the air group from Shōkaku to provide cover. For the next year, the sisters trained before moving south to defend against any American attempt to retake the Mariana Islands of the Philippines. Shōkaku was sunk by an American submarine during the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944 as the Americans invaded the Marianas, and Shōkaku was sacrificed as a decoy 4 months later during the Battle of Cape Engano. Background and description. The two Shōkaku-class carriers were ordered in 1937 as part of the Third Naval Armaments Supplement Program, no longer restricted by the provisions of the Washington Naval Treaty, which had expired in December 1936, and with relaxed budgetary limitations. The IJN sought qualitative superiority over the foreign counterparts, drawing on experience with their existing carriers. The Navy General Staff laid out an ambitious requirement for a ship that equaled the 96 aircraft capacity of the Akagi and Kaga, the speed of Hiryu and the defensive armament of Kaga. The new ship was also to have superior protection and range over any of the existing carriers. The basic design section of the Navy Technical Department decided upon an enlarged and improved Hiryu design with the island on the port side, amidships. After construction of the ships began, the Naval Air Technical Department began having second thoughts about the location of the island, because it thought that the port-side location of the island on Hiryu and Akagi had an adverse impact on airflow over the flight deck. Another issue identified was that the amidships position shortened the available landing area, which had the potential to be problematic in the future as aircraft landing speeds increased with the growing weight. To verify these assumptions, the NATD filmed hundreds of takeoffs and landings aboard Akagi in October to November 1938 and decided to move the island over to the starboard side, and further forward, about 1/3 of the length from the bow. Shōkaku was the furthest advanced by this point, and the supporting structure for the bridge had already been built. Rebuilding it would have delayed construction, so it was left in place. The changes that had to be made consisted of a 1-meter widening of the flight deck opposite the island and a corresponding 50-centimeter narrowing on the starboard side, and the addition of 100 metric tons of ballast on the port side to rebalance the ship. The ships had a length of 257.5 meters overall, a beam of 29 meters, a draft of 9.32 meters at deep load, and a molded depth of 23 meters. They displaced 32,105 metric tons at deep load. Based on hydrodynamic research conducted for the Yamato-class battleships, the Shōkaku-class received a bulbous bow and twin riders, both of which were positioned on the centerline abaft the propellers. Their crew consisted of 1,660 men, 75 commissioned officers, 56 special duty officers, 71 warrant officers, and 1,458 petty officers and crewmen, excluding the air group. The Shōkaku-class ships were fitted with 4 Kampon-geared steam turbine sets, each driving one 4.2-METER propeller, using steam provided by Kampon-type Model B water tube boilers, with a working pressure of 30 kilograms per square centimeter. The boilers gave the turbines enough steam to generate a total of 160,000 shaft horsepower and a design speed of 34.5 knots. This was the most powerful propulsion system in IJN service, 10,000 and 8,000 shaft horsepower more than the Yamato-class and the Mogami-class cruiser, respectively. During the sea trials, the sister ships achieved 34.37 to 34.58 knots from 161,290 minus 168,100 shaft horsepower. They carried 5,000 metric tons of fuel oil, which gave them a range of 9,700 nautical miles at 18 knots. The boiler uptakes were trunked to the ship's starboard side amidships and exhausted just below flight deck level through 2 funnels that curved downward. The Shōkaku-class was fitted with 3 600-kilowatt turbo generators and 2 350-kilowatt diesel generators, all operating at 225 volts. Flight deck and hangars. The carrier's 242.2-METER flight deck had a maximum width of 29 meters and overhung the superstructure at both ends, supported by pillars. 10 transverse arrestor wires were installed on the flight deck that could stop a 4,000-kilogram aircraft. If the aircraft missed those, it could be stopped by one of 3 crash barricades. Although space and weight were allocated for 2 aircraft catapults, the development was not completed before the Shōkaku-class ships were sunk. The ships were designed with 2 superimposed hangars. The upper hangar was about 200 meters long and had a width that varied between 18.5 and 24 meters. It had a height of 4.85 meters, while the lower hangar was 4.7 meters high and only usable by fighters. The lower hangar was about 20 meters shorter than the upper one, and its width ranged from 17.5 to 20 meters. Together they had a total area of 5,545 square meters. Each hangar could be subdivided by 5 or 6 fire curtains, and they were fitted with firefighting foam dispensers on each side. The lower hangar was also fitted with a carbon dioxide fire suppression system. Each subdivision was provided with a pair of enclosed and armored stations to control the fire curtains and firefighting equipment. Aircraft were transported between the hangars and the flight deck by 3 elevators that took 15 seconds to go from the lower hangar to the flight deck. The forward elevator was larger than the others to allow aircraft that had just landed to be moved below without folding the wings, and measured 13 by 16 meters. The other elevators were narrower, 13 by 12 meters. The ships mounted a crane on the starboard side of the flight deck, abreast the rear elevator. When collapsed, it was flush with the flight deck. The Shōkaku-class carriers were initially intended to have an air group of 96, including 24 aircraft in reserve. These were envisioned as 12 Mitsubishi A5M monoplane fighters, 24 YGD-1A2 Type 96 dive bombers, 24 Mitsubishi B5M Type 97 No. 2 torpedo bombers, and 12 Nakajima C-3N Type 97 reconnaissance aircraft. All of these aircraft were either superseded by larger, more modern aircraft or cancelled while the ships were being built, so the air group was revised to consist of 18 Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters, 27 IGD-3A dive bombers, and 27 Nakajima B5N torpedo bombers. In addition, the ship carried 2 Zeros, 5 Vals, and 5 Kades as spares for a total of 84 aircraft. Armament and sensors. The carrier's primary anti-aircraft armament consisted of 8 twin-gun mounts equipped with 40 caliber 12.7-CENTIMETER type 89 dual-purpose guns mounted on projecting sponsons, grouped into pairs fore and aft on each side of the hull. The guns had a range of 14,700 meters and a ceiling of 9,440 meters at an elevation of +90 degrees. The maximum rate of fire was 14 rounds a minute, but the sustained rate of fire was around 8 rounds per minute. The ship was equipped with 4 Type 94 fire control directors to control the 12.7 cm guns, one for each pair of guns. Although the director on the island could control all of the Type 89 guns, the light Aaa armament consisted of a dozen triple gun mounts for license-built Hotchkiss 25mm Type 96 Aa guns, 6 mounts on each side of the flight deck. The gun was the standard Japanese light Aa weapon during World War II, but it suffered from severe design shortcomings that rendered it largely ineffective. According to historian Mark Still, the weapon had many faults, including an inability to handle high-speed targets because it could not be trained or elevated fast enough by either hand or power. Its sights were inadequate for high-speed targets. It possessed excessive vibration and muzzle blast. These guns had an effective range of 1,500–3,000 meters and a ceiling of 5,500 meters at an elevation of +85 degrees. The effective rate of fire was only between 110 and 120 rounds per minute because of the frequent need to change the 15-round magazines. The Type 96 guns were controlled by 6 Type 95 directors, one for every pair of mounts. In June 1942, Shōkaku and Zuikaku had their anti-aircraft armament augmented with 6 more triple 25mm mounts, 2 each at the bow and stern, and 1 each fore and aft of the island. The bow and stern groups each received a Type 95 director. In October, another triple 25mm mount was added at the bow and stern, and 10 single mounts were added before the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944. After the battle, Zuikaku's anti-aircraft armament was reinforced with 26 single mounts for the 25mm Type 96 gun, bringing the total of 25mm barrels to 96, 60 and 20 triple mounts and 36 single mounts. These guns were supplemented by 28-round Aa rocket launch. Each 12-centimeter rocket weighed 22.5 kilograms and had a maximum velocity of 200 meters per second. The maximum range was 4,800 meters. Shōkaku was the first carrier in the IJN to be fitted with radar, a Type 21 early warning radar, mounted on the top of the island around September 1942. The date of Shōkaku's installation is unknown, but both ships received a second Type 21 radar in a retractable installation adjacent to the flight deck after October. Before June 1944, a Type 13 air search radar was installed on the light tripod mast abaft the island. The Shōkaku-class carriers were also fitted with a Type 91 hydrophone in the bow that was only useful when anchored or moving very slowly. Protection. The Shōkaku-class had a waterline belt that consisted of 46 mm of copper alloy non-cemented armor that covered most of the length of the ship. The belt was 4.1 meters high, of which 2 meters was below the waterline. The lower strake of the armor was backed by 50 mm of decal steel. The magazines were protected by 165 mm of New Vickers non-cemented armor, sloped at an inclination up to 25 degrees and tapered to thicknesses of 55 to 75 mm. The flight and both hangar decks were unprotected, and the ship's propulsion machinery was protected by a 65 mm deck of CNC armor. The NVNC armor over the magazines was 132 mm thick and 105 mm thick over the aviation gasoline storage tanks. All of the deck armor was overlaid on a 25 mm deck of decal steel. The Shōkaku were the first Japanese carriers to incorporate a torpedo belt system, based on model experiments that began in 1935. It consisted of a liquid-loaded sandwich of compartments outboard of the torpedo bulkhead. The experiments showed that a narrow liquid-loaded compartment was necessary to distribute the force of a torpedo or mine's detonation along the torpedo bulkhead by spreading it across the full width of the bulkhead and to stop the splinters created by the detonation. Outboard of this were two compartments intended to dissipate the force of the gases of the detonation, including the watertight compartment of the double bottom. The two innermost compartments were intended to be filled with fuel oil that would be replaced by water as it was consumed. The torpedo bulkhead itself consisted of an outer decal plate 18 to 30 mm thick that was riveted to a 12 mm plate. The IJN expected the torpedo bulkhead to be damaged in an attack and placed a thin holding bulkhead slightly inboard to prevent any leaks from reaching the ship's vitals. Ships